Now to the budget battle playing out in Lansing. Lawmakers have just 1 week to agree on a budget or the government will shut down. Both sides are at a stalemate right now in the legislature. Last month, House Republicans passed a $54.5 billion spending plan. They say will cut waste, fraud, and abuse in the state government and redirect the dollars to priorities like public safety and more than $3 billion to repair the state's crumbling bridges and roads. Governor Whitmer says she has her own $3 billion plan that will create a sustainable source of funding for road and infrastructure repairs, but Republicans are not on board. Last week, we talked to the former state budget director under Governor Snyder on what we could face if a shutdown happens.
Some of it is just annoying, right? Maybe state parks being closed, drawbridges being up. If you're dealing with state government waiting for a business license or something like that, that may be delayed. The bigger worry is this could impact the state's credit rating. Credit rating agencies look very closely at things like budget instability. Are you getting your work done on time?
Now, both sides are on the same page about one thing, and that's their optimism a deal will be done in time. To talk more about that budget, we are joined by Jordan Hermany. She is a Capitol reporter for Bridge, Michigan. Jordan, thank you again for joining us. What are you hearing in terms of what they think is going to be accomplished in both the House and the Senate?
Well, so to your point, the optimism is the key, right? I mean, we have two budgets out of the House and the Senate controlled by Democrats, the House controlled by Republicans, that are several $billion apart. The Senate Democrats are proposing in all, including with schools, which are a separate budget from funding the entire state government, an $84.5 billion budget out of the Senate and a $78.5 billion budget out of the House. Roads has been a big issue, as you've noted, and for right now, it's looking like it's crunch time. I'm totally anticipating that we're going to see them doing long session days this week and potentially even adding more to the calendar, like we saw this past Monday with the Senate having a rare in-person session day on a Monday, which is not typical for Lansing.
Right. You know, a lot of the frustration from this process comes because there are committees and things that are not done behind closed doors, but we don't always understand what the holdups are until things get to the floor. And then even then, sometimes it's difficult to understand. Do you have any kind of a finger on a pulse on the key holdups from both parties?
So that's an interesting question that you ask, and by and large, it's a number of things, right? So we go back to the roads plan. Governor Whitmer has announced a $3 billion plan to try and repair the state's crumbling roads and bridges. The House has passed, as we noted earlier, its own roads plan, and the Senate, meanwhile, has said, we don't need multiple plans. What we need to do is just pick something, stick with it. But first and foremost, we need to fund the state budget. So, you know, that's one of the big sticking points right now. Roads, there's only so much money to go around. And then there's another, you know, multiple other finite, smaller, but no less important issues going around as well, any number of which could be a sticking point for a divided legislature.
Right. So speaking of a divided legislature, in your opinion, which I know we're journalists don't have opinions, but sometimes when you cover a beat long enough, you can form one, at least get an idea behind it. Are the issues here budget-based or are they party-based?
I want to say, you know, it's a bit of both, because I don't think you can decouple one without the other. You've heard lawmakers say multiple times that a budget is a living document. It emphasizes our priorities, our values. So in that regard, you know, it is a little bit of politics as well, because we have the Republican budget, which out of the House, they're saying we want to cut back. First and foremost, we have to cut back. We're already having economists tell us that, for instance, the Senate budget, it's already $1.1 billion bigger than what we could afford to stand with the new federal spending bill that was recently signed into law. And so they're looking at cutting. They're looking at reducing what they're calling waste, fraud, and abuse. Senate Democrats, meanwhile, are choosing to emphasize and put money into things that they view as high priority. So things like education, which is also not to imply that the Republican plan does not emphasize education as well. But, you know, so we go back to this, it's a living, breathing document. And it's really hard for folks to say that, you know, we're going to cut here, we're going to not cut there. But at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to make concessions, because you can't have one chamber just passing a budget on its own.
Right, right. So do you feel that sense of urgency yet, or does that start to come when we're like 72 hours out?
I mean, I definitely think the sense of urgency is there this week already. If the number of text messages I've received is anything to go by. And I think that it's only going to increase in the coming days. I do want to be incredibly clear. We've had shutdowns in the past before. We've had two within the last 20 years, but those lasted hours. I believe the 2007 one lasted approximately 4 hours. So even if we get to that point, which obviously the goal is to not get to that point in the first place, the past precedent would suggest that this is something that lawmakers do have the ability to work quickly through and resolve for the people of Michigan.
Yeah. Okay, Jordan, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you much more about school funding. So stay with us. We'll be back in 1 minute. Welcome back to Local 4 Live. A budget battle in Lansing happening right now with a week left to come to an agreement. While roads is a main focus of the budget, another big issue that could take a hit in Lansing if Lansing shuts down, schools. Schools already worried about operating without state funding, and there's the possibility of layoffs and using whatever reserves they have. Last month on Local 4 Live, we had a group of superintendents, a panel. They had a lot to say about this ongoing budget battle.
Like, your policy decisions and what you do tells me everything I need to know about how you feel about the kids I serve. And I'm not feeling really great on either side of the aisle right now.
School meals right now, we only have a guarantee that school meals will be available for all until September 30th.
Right.
And so that would be a cost. We have to make a decision as a school district.
This is a Democrat problem, it's a Republican problem, and the governor shares responsibility on this as well. And I'm going to go out there and say that. She is the leader of this state, and there's a way that she needs to bring people inside and in the office and say, look, we got to figure this out. Where are the differences and how do we move forward, because this is ludicrous.
Now, in terms of school meals, let's check on what some schools are doing if a budget is not passed. Northville Schools just agreed to keep its free meal program going until at least October 31st. And Utica Schools also has funding until the end of October. Both Dearborn and Detroit schools are federally funded, so they're not affected. But Ann Arbor and Bloomfield Hills schools say it will only be able to provide free and reduced meals to students who qualify. Finally, Plymouth Canton says they'll have the same thing, reducing free and reduced meals based on income. Some schools will keep offering them. Other schools in the district will switch to standard pricing. So let's bring back in Jordan Hermany. She is a Capitol reporter for Bridge, Michigan. Jordan, there was a conversation early on when the budget discussions began that the legislature could at least pass the education portion of the budget so schools knew what they were doing. What happened there?
Well, I think it comes down to negotiation tactics. I mean, why give up a card that you could play or something that you could use to hold leverage when you don't have other parts of the budget decided? The legislature does have a statutory deadline of July 1, excuse me, which they put back into law during the Snyder administration as a point to try and give schools clarity. Now, that deadline basically says, hey, legislature, you need to pass a school budget by July 1st, so that way we can give our schools some level of stability. However, there's no teeth attached to missing that deadline, so lawmakers don't really have an incentive. And as we've kind of seen with this legislature this year, they don't work well unless under pressure, in my opinion. We can look to the number of bills passed this year, many of which were done only under a deadline. We've seen that number kind of increase recently, but this is a legislature that works under pressure, and now that pressure is coming with the October 1st constitutional deadline.
Right. Is there a point of embarrassment at all for either the House or the Senate or both when you know that schools are floundering, not knowing how to run their year, and free meals could be running out and things aren't going well and it's their fault?
So I think that again kind of goes back to the politics of things. Is it your fault or is it the opposition's fault? We've heard a decent amount of finger pointing from Democrats and Republicans saying, well, if we had passed our budget, or Republicans who had floated earlier this term what they were calling a government shutdown prevention plan, which would fund the government at a bare bones minimum level until a finalized state budget could be put in place, which was sharply rebuked and rejected by Senate Democrats. So now we're here. Now we're stuck with waiting for whether or not we're going to see something passed by October 1st. And at the moment, They do seem to be coming together, but that doesn't mean that the finger pointing still isn't happening, especially online.
Right. I've heard from a lot of people who say, at the very least, you could have gotten it together for the kids. Which, to your point, though, I think there's just going to be finger pointing instead of anybody having a conversation. Is there any heightened urgency on that note, though, because of what's happening in schools, or does it just go back to, well, we have this deadline we're working on now?
I mean, I think we're at the point in time where everything is urgent. Obviously, nobody wants to have school children caught in the middle of things, but at this point, with just a week left until October 1st, everything is of the same level of kind of 5-alarm fire right now. And so that's kind of where things stand. I mean, I know educators have been trying to rally outside the Capitol. I believe there are some even going to be there today with an educators union urging folks to pass the budget. And it's crunch time. We're stuck not really knowing necessarily where lawmakers are at in this budget decision, but we have to think it's coming because, again, October 1 is just around the corner.
Yeah. Jordan, I imagine you'll probably be setting up your cot and just staying at the Capitol for the next couple of days.
I'm fortunate enough that I live close by, so thankfully can probably get a bed, but not much sleep.
There you go. Okay, Jordan, thank you so much for your insight, and I can't wait to see what happens in Lansing over the next couple of days here.